Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this beautiful, absolutely lovely Tuesday afternoon. It's always a great day when you wake up to the Cowboys losing, and when you watch the Cowboys lose, it's always just a fantastic day. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in the first segment. I apologize for being very late for those of you guys that tune in on the YouTube side of the channel. I got held up in a meeting. It was a very long meeting. We were talking about college. And then in the second segment, we're going to talk about the Jets surprisingly firing Joe Douglas, and I'm going to give my opinions on that in the second segment. Then in the third segment, we are going to look at James Harden passing Ray Allen in total three-pointers, a record that was previously thought unbreakable until Steph Curry broke it, but again, no one really expected anyone else aside from Steph to break it. And then in the fourth segment, we are going to look at the NBA power rankings that were revealed earlier this week on Monday. I had no time to do that because I was covering all of the football games that happened on Monday. And we also have a special fifth segment at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that if you guys are interested. Before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something that you've just been dying to share, we're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Or if Super Chat's not your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So, without further ado, let's go right ahead and get into this first segment. So, obviously, I'm wearing this Cowboy hat because Dallas loses. I'm probably going to wear it every single time that Dallas loses because I just love it. I love it when Dallas loses. And not only that, it was also, I call it the Texas Bowl. I call it the Texas Bowl because it's like both of these teams are, they play in Texas. And, I mean, they were both going up against each other. I said before that this was sort of a get-right game for Houston. And, I mean, they definitely got right on the Cowboys, all right. I mean, not to mention, while the season is collapsing for Dallas, it should also be noted that the stadium is also collapsing for Dallas. Yes, the Cowboys, they wanted to open up their roof for like the first time in 2 years, and a piece of metal just fell off from the roof. Nobody got hurt, luckily, but it's literally like a physical representation of the Cowboys and their season. And not only that, this picture is also a representation of the Cowboys and their season. Just nothing but disappointments. Now, of all the major sports teams in the USA, this includes NBA, this includes NHL, this includes NFL, this includes college. Every single team has been able to win a home game this year. The Cowboys are the only team that has yet to win a single home game this year. And I'm not talking about the season. I'm talking about this year. Jake Paul was able to win a match in their stadium before the Cowboys were even able to win a home game. Texas A&M has been able to win. I believe it was A&M. Either that or it was the Aggies. They were able to win in Dallas's home field. And still, no other team has been able to do that. No other team aside from Dallas has lost at home in this season. They have at least one home win this season. But Dallas, of course, they just disappoint their fans year in after year. It's just absolutely horrible what's going on in Dallas. The game, as a Giants fan, the game was absolutely beautiful. Like, I loved every single second of it, aside from the very few seconds when Dallas started to score. The final score of this game was 34-10 in favor of Houston. It started out like pretty much like anyone would expect. Houston opening up with a touchdown. Literally on the first drive, they opened up with a huge touchdown run from Mixon. He had a lot of fantasy points in tonight's matchup. And a lot of people, they thought this was a little bit of a boring game. I was never bored when Dallas was losing. I always just love it when they lose. And opening up the game with a touchdown drive is just a great way to just pour salt on the wound. And then Dallas responded with probably one of the funniest 4-point conversion attempts. They tried a fake punt, and then they threw the ball a little bit beyond the line of scrimmage, but they didn't throw the ball far enough to make it a first down. And it ultimately resulted in a turnover on downs, but Houston was feeling generous today, and C.J. Stroud threw an interception after 4 plays. So, and it was a bad interception. I mean, it seems that C.J. Stroud still sort of, I don't know what is the problem with CJ. Maybe it's the fact that he doesn't have as much talent at the receiving end because, everybody is injured. But that throw was absolutely horrible. But fear not, because Dallas decided to be generous again and throw an interception to give the Texans the ball right back. I mean, Cooper Rush in this game, he did throw for 354 yards, but he passed 55 times in this game. So it's like, you better get at least 300 yards if you're passing that much. And he did throw a touchdown, but he also threw an interception. So, I mean, the touchdown, I was not a fan of that touchdown. But after he threw the interception, Houston responded with a touchdown of their own, making the score 14-0. But then Dallas, opening up the second quarter, they opened up with a touchdown. Then Houston responded with a field goal, to which Dallas responded with another field goal. Then Houston punted, and it seemed like Dallas was going to be able to make the game a little bit close, but then they missed a field goal. What a shocker. Dallas disappoints yet again. And then Houston ended up punting, and then Dallas turned it over on downs. And in the third quarter, there was a whole lot of nothing in the third quarter. I mean, Dallas, they ended up punting. The Texans, they ended up taking a field goal on a 10-play drive that was 65 yards. And then Dallas decided to turn the ball over on downs after 13 plays and gaining 62 yards. And after that, in the fourth quarter, that was when the beautiful thing happened. So Houston punted, and then Dallas was, they had the ball. But get this. Dallas fumbled twice on one play. So Cooper Rush ended up getting strip sack. It resulted in a fumble, but luckily the ball was recovered by one of the Cowboys players. And then Houston forced a tackle, and then Dallas fumbled again. And obviously Cooper Rush fumbles, and it was forced by D. Barnett, I believe. And then once he fumbled the ball, Dallas had it still. It was a forward pass, but he lost it, and it was a fumble. Then Dallas recovered it. It seemed like he was going to go down, but then Houston forced a fumble, and then the fumble was returned all the way back to it was returned 28 yards and all the way back into the Cowboys end zone. And then the score was 26-10, and then he kicks a field goal to make the score 27-10. And really, that was when the game ended. But then to add further salt in the wound, a few plays later, the Texans, they ended up scoring another touchdown to seal the win, 34-10, and that was the end of the game. Dallas did absolutely nothing for most of these games. They tried going for it a lot because, they had nothing to lose. And another hilarious thing that happened for Dallas was that their kicker ended up making, I believe, a 60-yard field goal, right? But then there was a penalty on the play, which Dallas, for some reason, decided to accept to move the ball a little bit closer. Then they decided to go for it after accepting that penalty, and they got 0 points out of it. So Dallas essentially traded 3 points for 0 points on that drive. It was just absolutely beautiful, incredible coaching from McCarthy, just fantastic organization work overall. And to make matters worse, the sun was not there in this game. So I wonder what the excuse for Dallas was for losing in this matchup. This was just a beautiful game. Fantastic game. I just love this image right here. I just love it when Dallas loses. They're 3-7 right now. One of the worst teams in the entire NFL. One of the worst teams in the NFC East as well. The Giants, they are the worst team in the NFC East right now. And Dallas is right there. The only difference between Dallas and the Giants right now is a 1-game difference. And it's just beautiful. If my team, the New York Giants, if they cannot win seasons, then I always have Dallas to look forward to and Dallas losing. I just love every single second of it. Now, on Houston's side, like I said, this was a get-right game for them because they were struggling in some of the recent matchups that they've played, especially in Week 10 when they ended up losing to the Lions after Jared Goff threw like 5 interceptions. They were held scoreless throughout that entirety of the second half, and it was a really bad game, and it was a really bad way to lose in that game, but they ultimately handled business here. Now, the next games on the Texans' schedule is the Titans, another get-right game for them just in case this Dallas beating wasn't enough. Then they play the Jags, another get-right game, and then their last few games of the season is going to be against the Dolphins. They seem to be a little bit more competent now, given that they have Tua Tagovailoa. Then they play the Chiefs, a team that just came off of their first loss of the season, so that might not go as well as you think. And then the Ravens, who right now have the exact same record as the Texans. It could really go either way with that, but I'm picking the Ravens to win in that matchup. And then their final game of the season is against the Titans again. So their road to the playoffs it's pretty easy. I mean, they're in one of the weaker divisions in the entire AFC. I don't think the Colts are going to put up much of a fight to win the AFC, and the Titans and the Jaguars are already out. I mean, they only have 2 wins in this entire season, and it seems like they're going to be fighting for a draft pick more so than they're going to be fighting for the division. So the only team that the Texans really have to worry about is the Colts, and I don't think that the Colts are going to be able to put up much of a threat. They do play the Lions. Then they play the Pats, which is a pretty solid game. Then they're going to play the Broncos. I mean, Bo Nix recently had the game of his life. Then they're going to have to play the Texans again. Then they play the Giants, and then they play the Jaguars. So theoretically, they do have an easier schedule than the Texans going forward. But I don't think they're going to be, again, I'm not sure. Maybe Anthony Richardson just does something unbelievable and CJ Stroud on the Texans drop a couple of games. I don't really see that happening, but, we'll see how it goes with the rest of the season. So that's all that I have on this Texas Bowl. And, I mean, it happened exactly like how I expected it to, with Dallas losing. Their season is over. Their stadium is collapsing. Everything is just going all according to plan. And a little bit earlier than what a lot of people expected. So now we're going to go into the second segment where we talk about the Jets making a surprising move and firing their GM Joe Douglas. And we'll talk about that right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we're going to be looking at the Jets, surprisingly, firing their GM, Joe Douglas, early, well, not really early, but a little bit late in the season. And, I mean, his contract was already over. But before I begin, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something that you've just been dying to share, we are all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not really your thing, then you can always use the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment, gsmcpodcast.net. You can send in your comments and or donations that way as well. Really helps the show. Makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this second segment, which is talking about Joe Douglas being fired. For all of you Jets fans out there, it's been a very, very, very rough season, especially in this one when there were a lot of expectations for the Jets to have a winning record and possibly win the division. But, of course, that did not happen, and that is not going to happen at this rate. I mean, this is probably their most disappointing season in a very long time. And this man right here, probably one of the worst GMs, not just in Jets history, but in NFL history, period. I mean, his time with the Jets has been absolutely awful. And he most likely wasn't going to retain his job towards the end of this season because his time with the Jets was already expiring. And they sort of just pulled the plug on him a little bit early. And you have to think, maybe there is another GM or maybe there's somebody else that they're already looking for to be the GM for the Jets. And they sort of want to capitalize on that and sort of ensure that no other team is going to go ahead and grab him as the season plays out. And I think that's the reason why they ended up firing him early. That might be a reason. Again, it's all speculation. We have no idea. But he finishes with the Jets with a 30-63 record in his 93 games as the team's general manager. Obviously, it's a horrible record, and it's worse than both John Idzik and Mike Maccagna. Forgive me if I messed up any of those last names. They're really difficult to pronounce. And those guys that I just mentioned, they're seen as two of the worst GMs in the entirety of Jets history. And Douglas has been given more games than both Idzik and Maccagnan in his time with the Jets. Like, he was given a lot of time to try and create a solid roster, but he's never been able to produce a roster that ends the season with a winning record, which is obviously, it's horrible. And in all the games that he's played, like, he was so bad as a GM that he ranks 105th out of 107 managing football executives since 1977. Like, the 105th out of 107. That is practically like the third worst since 1977. And this is among GMs that have spent at least 5 years with an organization. So that is really, really, really bad. This includes owners who have held that title and executives who overlapped with each other. Like, he might be the worst GM in the entire history of the Jets. And he had some positive moments. His 2022 draft class still stands out as one of the best achievements that the Jets have had. Even if the likes of Sauce Gardner and Breece Hall have regressed in 2024, that draft class was still really, really good. I mean, nobody really expected Breece Hall to have this kind of regression, so that might be a player issue. Same with Sauce Gardner. Again, it might also be a player issue. But to start out their seasons when they got drafted, they played very, very solid, especially Sauce Gardner, who was already being considered as one of the better corners in the NFL. And again, the biggest problem is just that the roster and the teams, they've never been able to produce a single winning season. Even having Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers, and I completely understand that Aaron is very, very old, the team still has yet to gain any sort of traction this season, and they just keep losing. Even getting all-pro wide receiver Davante Adams, he was an all-pro for a couple of years, but again, on Green Bay, he was phenomenal. And even having him, it doesn't really seem like the Jets have veered off their trajectory at all from this season. In fact, they're worse now with Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams than they were with Zach Wilson at quarterback. And speaking of Zach Wilson, it was Joe Douglas's decision to go ahead and draft Zach Wilson. And I'm sure all of you Jets fans and everyone knows exactly what happened with Zach Wilson. He threw a crazy ball and sort of catfished everybody in this league, but he was an awful quarterback. He was absolutely terrible at quarterback for the Jets. And it's been a train wreck of a season. I mean, you got rid of what people thought was the problem. Literally, like, the talk of the Jets last season and the seasons with Zach Wilson was that this team is a competent team and a contending team if they actually have a solid quarterback. They got a solid quarterback. Again, Aaron Rodgers, I will say, he has not been playing as well as people thought he would play with the Jets. He still hasn't had a 300-yard passing game for the Jets. And it's been absolutely awful with Aaron. But again, people thought that once they got Aaron Rodgers, then he would sort of be the chosen one, the one that would lift the Jets out of a losing record and bring them to a winning record. But ever since he went down in the very first game in the Jets uniform, then the Jets' hopes and dreams just collapsed. Now he's healthy, and still the Jets' hopes and dreams collapse. It's been awful. And it was awful. I mean, again, being responsible for drafting Zach Wilson is never a good sign, and it's not something that you want to be remembered for. Not to mention the latest QB selection and solution in Aaron Rodgers, it looks to be a huge whiff. I mean, the way that this season has turned out, it's been awful. He hired a head coach who had a 20-36 record with the Jets. So, again, another awful decision there. He's had 6 years to build a roster that can compete for a Super Bowl, and the result is a 3-7 football team that's one loss away from the worst record in the entire NFL. And that is, like, aside from Dallas and maybe even the Giants, they are one of the biggest laughingstocks in the entirety of the NFL right now. And I'd say a little bit more than they're a bit more of a laughingstock than the Giants right now, because having Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, you're sort of expected to compete. I don't think the Giants were expected to compete at all this season. I mean, I knew that we weren't going to compete, but I figured we'd make some of these games a little bit competitive. But of course, Daniel Jones at quarterback is just, you're not going to get competitive games out of him, and I realize that now. And a lot of this issue and a lot of this blame, it sort of falls on it sadly is going to fall on the GM right now. I mean, like, the decision making with the draft selections and just the overall roster, there's a lot of problems. It's not just Aaron Rodgers at quarterback that's the problem. Everyone is struggling, and it's just been really, really bad. Again, you could argue that it's like, a player issue, and that, maybe firing the coach wasn't all that good of an idea, but it's not a good look. He had 6 years to create a team, and he's failed. So this is sort of the result, and it was most likely that he wasn't going to retain his job towards the end of this season, but they sort of they pulled the trigger a little bit earlier than what a lot of people expected, or pulled the plug, for lack of a better term. For those of you guys who don't like gun references, I completely understand. But this has just been awful. They're going to part ways with Douglas in the offseason, simply opting to let his initial 6-year contract expire. That's what I thought they were going to do, instead of extending him, but then they decided to just fire him. And again, he's most likely going to go down as one of the worst general managers, not just in Jets history, but in the entire history of the NFL. A very, very bad legacy to leave behind, and I don't really expect him to get a job after this season, especially with just how bad he's been. Like, it's really just, it's bad. So the Jets, they can rejoice over something in this season, finally getting rid of that GM. I wonder who they're going to get. Let me know in the comments who you guys think they're going to get to be their GM for next season. But we're out of time in the second segment, so now we're going to shift our focus to NBA basketball, where we talk about James Harden passing Ray Allen in all-time three-pointers made. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we're going to be looking at James Harden breaking a record that was previously thought to be unbreakable for a very, very long time, and that is Ray Allen's record for total three-point makes in NBA history. Now, before Steph Curry, nobody really thought that this record was going to be touchable, and nobody really thought that no one thought that anyone would come close to hitting as many three-pointers as Ray Allen did. I mean, Ray Allen is one of the best three-point shooters in NBA history, despite the fact that James Harden recently passed him in total three-point makes. I still think that Ray Allen is a better shooter than James Harden. I mean, throughout his career, he's shot 40% from the three-point line, and when considering the years that he's played in the NBA, remember, he was drafted in 96, and he continued playing all the way till 2014, where he ended his season off in Miami. And in the early eras of basketball, the three-point shooting wasn't really all that popular. And with the combined efforts of Reggie Miller and Ray Allen as well, they sort of popularized it. Like, they sort of made it an effective shot. I think the Spurs, they also don't get nearly enough credit for introducing the importance of three-point shooting, because the Spurs, before any other team was doing it, was encouraging their players to hit a bunch of corner threes and be in the corner and get ready to shoot those threes, right? And while Golden State is definitely going to get a lot more credit than the Spurs, I do think that we should give credit to where it's due in the Spurs trying to start that movement a little bit first. It's just the league sort of didn't really catch on as quickly as when the Golden State Warriors started shooting a bunch of threes. Let me see. Okay, never mind. So I thought I got some breaking news and talking about basketball, but it's not really breaking news. It's just Tyrese Maxey reportedly calling out Joel Embiid. I have no idea exactly what the problem is going on over there, but I mean, Sixers have been absolutely awful. And that is James Harden's former team, but he ended up breaking this record as a Clipper, and he pulled up from the right wing and ended up reaching a career tally of 2,974 three-pointers, moving him out of a second-place tie with Ray Allen. And again, this was a record that nobody thought was going to be broken up until Steph Curry ended up joining the NBA. Not just joining the NBA, but like introducing his barrage of three-pointers and how many threes he's able to make. And one other thing that should be taken into account is the amount of games that it took Steph Curry to actually break Ray Allen's three-point record. He played significantly less games than Ray Allen has done throughout his entire career. And again, this is just a fantastic record to end up like surpassing Ray Allen in total three-pointers make. Is he going to pass Steph Curry? Most likely not. I mean, Steph Curry started Sunday with 3,782 made career three-pointers, which is almost 800 more than James Harden in total three-pointers made. In fact, James Harden himself, he was like, Steph Curry doesn't count. Like, when they were talking about total three-pointers made, And obviously, the leader in total three-pointers made is Steph Curry. He said himself that Steph Curry does not count, which just goes to show you just how much of a, on a different level of playing field Steph Curry is compared to every other shooter in this league. And there's a very high chance that when Steph Curry retires, he's going to end with 4,000 three-pointers made. Very, very good chance that happens. And this is also this isn't one of Steph Curry's, crazy master classes of a season. I mean, he's not averaging as many points as you would expect coming in from a phenomenal shooter like Steph Curry. It wasn't like one of those 30-point per game seasons that he's been having. From the last time I checked, I saw that he was only averaging around 24 points per game, which it's not bad. Obviously, it's definitely not a bad points per game average for Steph, or for anybody else in this league. But actually, he's averaging 23 points per game in this season. But for somebody like Steph, you have to think that is a little bit low in the scoring category. And James Harden, I mean, he hasn't been a much better scorer either, especially when you want to consider. He did beat Steph Curry the other day, but again, this has sort of been a... We sort of all know that James Harden is nowhere near the same player that he was when he was on Houston. He's only averaging 20 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 9 assists. Again, these are numbers that a lot of guards would dream for in the NBA. But compared to what he was on Houston, obviously he's not the same animal that he was. But again, breaking this record is definitely great. And he's going to be a Hall of Famer. By far, one of the best guards in this era of basketball. The only stain on James Harden's career is his lack of postseason success and the inability to make the NBA Finals. And a big reason why he was unable to make the NBA Finals was because he was forced to go up against Golden State and the juggernaut of a team that they were. I mean, having Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson is nearly impossible to beat. He almost did beat them if Chris Paul did not get injured in that one series in 2018, but again, hindsight is 2020, and he's most likely only going to be remembered as a player that was able to do great things in the regular season but just could not get it done in the postseason. But again, he's by far one of the best guards in today's NBA. So I just wanted to bring all of that to a lot of people's attention. He's not better than Dwayne Wade, though. I know a lot of people, they really want to think that he's better than D. Wade, but that's just not true. And this is going to be a little bit of a shorter third segment because I do want to get into the fourth segment, which is looking at the NBA and the power rankings, because that segment is probably going to be a little bit longer than the rest of the than this segment as well. And I want to make sure that I have a little bit of time so that way not only can I get to class on time, but also so that way I don't go over the limit of these segments. So we're going to go ahead and go into the fourth segment right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, again, like I said, it's going to be a little bit of a longer fourth segment than usual. We're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the NBA power rankings going into this week. Now, there were obviously some games yesterday. There are going to be a lot of games tonight as well. I'll get to talking about those in a few minutes. But let's go right ahead and get into these power rankings. So give me 1 second as I open up this page. There we go. I have not looked at these power rankings yet. So we're going to have to see. Obviously, Cleveland is going to stay at number 1. They remain the only team that has yet to lose a single game in this season. And this is one of the best starts in NBA history. They're only the 4th team in NBA history to win their first 15 games, joining the 1948-1949 Capitals, the 93-94 Houston Rockets, and the 2015 and 2016 Golden State Warriors, and they all reached the finals. So this is some good signs for Cleveland, but also some high expectations. And I'm not entirely sure if this team is going to be able to live up to those expectations, because now all eyes are going to be on him. And this stat is also very hilarious. Like their 15 wins are more than the Pistons had all of last season, which is just 14. And that is absolutely awful. Now, tonight, the Cavs, they're expected to play the Boston Celtics. The Celtics are going to be playing at home. So this is going to be a really, really tough game for the Cavs. And we're going to see if they can actually live up to the expectations. If they're able to beat the Celtics in this matchup, they might be clear-cut favorites to make the Eastern Conference Finals. But I have no problem with this ranking whatsoever. Having them ranked at number 1 with this record, it makes complete, total sense. And it's absolutely amazing what they've been able to do. I mean, if you guys remember, and if you guys tune into any of my basketball podcasts, I was talking about all of the drama that was going on with the Cavs in their offseason. There was a whole lot of drama. Like, there were talks about blowing up the roster. There were talks about moving on from Donovan Mitchell. There were talks about moving on from Darius Garland. There were talks about moving on from both of them at one point and focusing on Evan Mobley. And look at what's happening now. They have the best offensive rating in the entire NBA, and it's just absolutely incredible what they've been able to do. And their defense is also surprisingly well, and that surprisingly great. And that's sort of like what a championship team is. Not just a team that can get it done on the offensive side, but a team that has some good defense to fall back on. So overall, great season so far from the Cavs. We'll see if they can keep it up. I'm pretty sure it's either the Celtics or the Warriors that are going to be next. Yeah, the Warriors are going to be next. It's like it's 2016 all over again, where the Cavs and the Warriors are dominating their respective conference. I mean, no one expected this start from the Warriors either. And they continue to win. They ended up losing, however, to the Clippers in an embarrassing 102-99 loss. And Steph Curry, he ended with 26 points. He did shoot 10 for 21 from the field, however. Norman Powell played very well in this game with 23 points. And this is just, only their 3rd loss in this season. So, again, this 10-2 record, this list was released on Monday. So, it's going to be a little bit inaccurate in terms of, teams that have ended up playing so far this week. But that's besides the point. Regardless, the next team on this list, OKC, probably the only team that I think should be ranked over the Golden State Warriors now. Despite losing Chet Holmgren, this team has still been, rather solid. I mean, again, solid. They did lose to the Dallas Mavericks, but they only lost 121-119. And think about it. They did not have a center in the starting lineup. Their starting lineup was SGA, Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, Isaiah Joe, and Aaron Wiggins. The tallest player in that lineup, in the starting lineup, was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is the point guard for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the fact that they were able to make this game competitive against the Dallas Mavericks. Now, I do understand that the Mavericks, they did not have Luka Doncic in this matchup, but they still had Kyrie. They also had Klay Thompson, and they also had P.J. Washington, who was a power forward, and they also had a center. Washington had 27 and 17. Obviously, he was going to outboard a team that did not have a single center in the starting lineup. Now, Klay Thompson, he had an awful game in this matchup, going 1 for 11 and 1 for 8 from 3. I don't know what's going on with Klay Thompson, but he really might be, as everyone else likes to call it, he might be washed up. I mean, it's been an abysmal season for Klay Thompson. He's nowhere near the same three-point shooting threat that I once feared when he was on Golden State. Through the season, he's averaging solid numbers, 13 points per game. But again, this is far from the Klay Thompson that anyone remembers in this season. And he's shooting 35% from three, drastically worse than what his 38% was last year. And it's not been looking good for Klay. It really has not. And here we have the Boston Celtics. They don't move a single spot from their roster, from the power rankings, excuse me. They're ranked 4th, and let me see. Really, they're going to have to win this game against the Cavs if they have any hopes of moving up in the power rankings. I mean, playing the Cavs at home, this should be a win for the Boston Celtics. I know that the Cavs, they haven't lost a single game yet, but if there was any game that they were going to drop in if there was any close game that they were going to have, it would be against the Boston Celtics. And if there was any game that they were going to drop in this week, it would be against the Boston Celtics. So if the Celtics can capitalize on this win, then they might move all the way up to 2, and or maybe even 1 at this point. Again, we're gonna have to see if they're able to give them their first loss. Next, a surprising pick for the 5th spot, the Houston Rockets. They ended up moving up all the way from 12th to 5th on the power rankings. Again, this is a massive jump, a jump that I really did not expect, but they did beat the Chicago Bulls 143-107 recently, and everybody on the Houston Rockets played phenomenally. Sengun had a triple-double with 20 points, 11 rebounds, and 11 assists. Fred VanVleet had 28 points. Jalen Green had 18 points. And judging by their schedule from the last week, they lost to the Bucks. However, they lost to the Bucks yesterday, so maybe they shouldn't be ranked at number 5. They did beat the Bulls, and they beat the Clippers twice, and they also ended up beating the Wizards. So I don't know if this warrants such a huge jump from 12 all the way to number 5. In fact, I would have probably put a team like the Lakers over here, or a completely different team than Houston Rockets being ranked at 5. Maybe even the Suns. They've actually been struggling, so I wouldn't put the Suns there. The Lakers, they seem like the only team that would be ranked higher than them. The Timberwolves, them being ranked at number 6 and moving up, despite the fact that they haven't lost many games, but they did lose twice to the Portland Trailblazers. I mean, losing twice to the Blazers and jumping up a spot, that is unacceptable. I don't agree with this ranking at all. Like, Houston should be over here and the Lakers should be over here. This does not make sense. They dropped 2 games against the Blazers. They did beat the Kings and they beat the Suns, but the Suns were shorthanded in that matchup. They did not have Kevin Durant and they did not have Bradley Beal. And Devin Booker, he did have 44 points in that matchup, but still, moving them up, despite the fact that they lost to the Blazers, it does not get talked about enough. And I do understand that buzzer beater was incredible, the Julius Randle buzzer beater over the Kings. That was a great shot. And, I mean, it's just, no. The buzzer beater on Sunday, against the Suns. I don't know why I said the Kings. That's my bad. But apparently he traveled on that play. I don't know why the NBA is doing these reports after the game as if they can do anything about it, but still, he traveled on that shot. So this should be taken with a grain of salt, and they should move down just because they lost to the Portland Trailblazers. The Mavericks moving up, I think they're underrating the Lakers completely. The Mavericks, they aren't even in playoff talks right now. They're not even in the play-in at this point. They did beat the Thunder, but the Thunder were shorthanded. They beat the Spurs, but again, the Spurs are far from a competent team yet, and they did not even have Victor Wembanyama in this matchup. So they beat a shorthanded Spurs, a shorthanded Thunder team. They lost to the Jazz, and then they lost to the Warriors. So they should not be ranked this high. They should dock a couple of points in their ranking, maybe stay at 11, or maybe even go down a little bit. in the rankings, because this did not make sense at all. And it's not like I understand that the Mavs, they were shorthanded against the Jazz, but again, it's the Jazz. It's one of the worst teams in the NBA. You should not be ranked this high. Not only when you have this record, but having the wins that you have and the losses that you had so far in this week. The Nuggets being ranked at number 8, I have no problem with their spot right now, being ranked at 8. But I do have a problem with the fact that the Lakers aren't ranked higher than them. And the Nuggets, they dropped a game to the shorthanded Pelicans. They also dropped a game to the Memphis Grizzlies, a team that I believe is also shorthanded. They did not have Ja Morant in this lineup. And again, losing those games, just not really acceptable. They did beat the Dallas Mavericks, but, really, it should not have, no. It should not be ranked here over the Lakers. That is a huge problem, and it's something that I understand. Jokic is an absolute beast of a player. I have no problem with Jokic as a player, but this team, no. They should not have. They should not be here at number 8. They should not be over the Lakers. And the Lakers are only at 9. I don't understand. Why are the Lakers only at 9? It genuinely does not make sense. LeBron James came off of 3 triple doubles and that's the first time that he's had 3 back-to-back triple doubles. And they got a win against the Pelicans, shorthanded team. Got a win against the Spurs, who I believe had Victor Wembanyama in the lineup. He ended with 28 points and 14 rebounds. And not to mention Anthony Davis having a masterclass of a performance against Victor Wembanyama, 40 and 12. And they did beat the Grizzlies. Again, it was a shorthanded Grizzlies, but again, LeBron was phenomenal in this matchup. They beat the Raptors, not a very competent team. And then they also ended up beating the 76ers in those last few games. So they should be ranked way higher than being at number 9 right now. They should be over the Timberwolves. At the very least, they should be over the Timberwolves, and they should be over the Dallas Mavericks. This is just, no, I do not accept this at all. This is a bad list. Aside from the top 3, this is a very poor list. And then the Memphis Grizzlies, they moved down. I completely understand why they moved down. They are shorthanded, but they're still somehow winning some games. The Kings, they ended up moving down because they ended up dropping a couple of games, and they were shorthanded as well. De'Aaron Fox was unbelievable in some of these matchups against against their opponents. He scored 109 points in 24 hours. And he joins Wilt Chamberlain, Bradley Beal, and Kobe Bryant as the only players in NBA history to score 105-plus points in back-to-back nights. Wilt Chamberlain did that 23 times, by the way. But, it makes sense that these guys drop in the rankings. It doesn't make sense that the Timberwolves rise in the rankings at all. I don't know why they're rising in the rankings and why they're over the Lakers. It does not make sense. Phoenix dropping makes total sense. They do not have Kevin Durant, and they also did not have Bradley Beal in a couple of these matchups either. So them dropping to 12 makes total sense. The Knicks, they move up. It's a bit of a rocky start for the Knicks, but I don't mind them being ranked at number 13. The Orlando Magic, surprisingly, they haven't really seemed to struggle nearly as much as I thought they would without Paolo Banchero. And they're also one of the very few teams that are flawless in the in-season tournament games. More on that later. The Pacers, they're dropping down, makes total sense. Clippers dropping down makes sense. Detroit moving up makes total sense because, again, no one really expected the Pistons to be a solid team. Again, ever since they went 0-4, they've been 7-4 ever since that 0-4 start, climbing to 5th place in the Eastern Conference, which is, unbelievable. No one really expected No one expected the Pistons to be able to. They dropped a little bit down since these rankings were made. They dropped down to number 7. But again, no one expected the Pistons to even be in playoff talks, regardless of how early in the season it is. The Heat, they ended up moving down. I feel like they should end up being moved up a little bit because they did beat the 76ers with Joel Embiid. I wouldn't be surprised if the Sixers are the worst team in the entire NBA, and in these power rankings. The Spurs being moved up to 19 makes a little bit of sense. Hawks being at 20 makes perfect sense for them. Brooklyn moving down, that makes total sense. I don't expect much from Brooklyn in this season at all. Blazers moving up, they should move up because they ended up beating the Timberwolves twice on back-to-back nights. The Charlotte Hornets, they moved down a little bit. Again, a team that's not really that competitive. The Bulls, they definitely deserve to move down. The Bucks, they should not be here at number 25. They should be way lower. They should be here. The Bucks should be right here, without a doubt. The Wizards, they're great in the spot that they're in. The Jazz, they should move up a little bit. The Raptors, maybe move them up a little bit. Here is where I wouldn't be surprised if the 76ers should be here. I mean, they're over at 26. With Joel Embiid going up against the Heat, they played absolutely abysmal. I don't know what's been going on. Maybe it's the fact that Joel Embiid did not play enough games and completely forgot how to score. He ended the game with only 11 points on 5 for 11 shooting. And this is the first game in like 2,000 days where he didn't even attempt a free throw. So, awful stuff coming in from Joel Embiid. And it's just been awful. The season for the 76ers has been nothing but a disappointment. Same with the Milwaukee Bucks. They should be dead last, honestly, just off of expectations alone. Absolutely awful. And the Bucks, they did win against the Houston Rockets, as I mentioned before. It was a very close win that ended with a Damian Lillard game-winning drive. But, hindsight is 2020, and those teams are just terrible. Unbelievably terrible. But that's all that I have for this fourth segment. Again, it was a much longer segment than any of the other segments. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the fifth segment where I talk about the in-season tournament, the games that are important for the in-season tournament, the group play. They're going to end up happening tonight. And so I'm going to give some of my predictions for these games right after the short break. So be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we are going to be looking at the NBA in-season tournament games. This is, for some teams, it's the second stage of the group play. For some teams, it is the third stage of the group play. So we're going to go ahead and look at and predict some of these games. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and there we go. You guys can see this this list. This should give you a better understanding of where each team currently is ranking in the, not just in point differential, but also in team record, just based off of their groups and their standings. So, as you could see, the Orlando Magic and the Knicks, they have the exact same record. However, the tiebreaker between these two is the point differential. Orlando, they had that huge win against the Charlotte Hornets, and that propelled them all the way up to the top spot. And they also ended up beating Philly because Philly is absolutely awful. And, I mean, the Knicks, they're right there, but it doesn't really seem like they're going to, at least at this rate, it doesn't seem like they're going to win in the Group A standing, so they might not even participate. Then in Group B, you have surprisingly the Pistons. They have a 2-0 record, despite the fact that if Milwaukee can win in another game in the group play, then they should end up taking the top spot in their entire group in Group B, because the point differential isn't really all that much. And not to mention the Pistons are going to have to go up against Indiana in Game 3. The Bucks, they also don't have an easy road. They have to go up against Indiana in Game 2. But that's how the standings work, and that's where it is. Miami Heat, they dropped a game, so that's why they're in the middle. And the Pacers and the Raptors, they have still yet to win a game in the group play. Next, in Group C, the Hawks, they're undefeated, as well as the Cavs. The Cavs, they have a much better point differential, so if they win against the Celtics, then most likely they're going to end up moving up. Depending on how much they beat the Celtics, or depending on how much they lose to the Celtics, because they do play the Celtics tonight, they could end up still being ranked at number 2, because then they'll be tied with the Boston Celtics. But the tiebreaker, the point differential, is going to be, for Cleveland, is still going to be greater than the Celtics, which will keep them in the number 2 spot. So they just have to make sure that they don't lose by more than 18 points, or more than 20 points, really, and then they'll still maintain that second spot in the group play. Then in the Western Conference, you have Houston and you have Portland. Houston has the highest point differential, which is why they're up. Same thing with OKC and the Lakers. And same thing with this group right here. Now, when you break it all down and go into the standings, right? The Knicks, they're the team that's going to end up having a wild card spot. So it's only one wild card spot per conference. So the way that it works is that the leaders for each group play. As you can see, Orlando's the leader, Detroit's the leader, and Atlanta's the leader. For each leader in the group play, they're automatically given a spot in the tournament, and then the wild card spot just goes to whichever team has the better record, the better point differential, and more points, all that stuff in the tiebreakers. So you could see the Knicks, they have by far the best record amongst anybody else in the group play, and that's the reason why they right now currently hold the wild card spot. Then over in the Western Conference, the Golden State Warriors, they have the best record, not just in the entirety of the Western Conference, but in their group play as well. Same with Houston and same with the Thunder. And the point differential for Portland is a big reason why they're in, and it's the only reason, it's the tiebreaker for why they are ranked at number 4 and they're holding the wild card spot, as opposed to the Lakers, the Lakers could take the wild card spot because they do play the Jazz, and they play the Jazz at home. I'm picking the Lakers for that matchup. And speaking of which, while we're up, we have somebody in the chat. How long will CeeDee Lamb stay a Cowboy? I have no idea. But if he gets fed up with Dak Prescott, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up leaving. Not entirely sure how much money other teams are going to be willing to give him, but I think it seems like he's probably going to stay a Cowboy for a while. I don't really see CeeDee Lamb like really leaving the Cowboys. Not just for next season. I don't really see him leaving at all. I mean, he recently signed a 4-year, $136 million contract with Dallas, which includes a $38 million signing bonus and $100 million guaranteed. So I don't think he's really going to end up leaving the Cowboys anytime soon, especially after signing this deal. And I don't really think that other teams are going to be willing to trade for him, especially with all the money that he's going to be making. Again, we'll have to see. But, I mean, if he gets tired of Dak, then maybe he's going to want to leave. But for now, he's probably going to stay a Cowboy for these next 4 years. And going back to NBA and in-season tournament play, the Nets, they're going to play the Charlotte Hornets. I'm going to go with my gut, and I'm going to pick the Hornets in this matchup. I have a lot more faith in the Hornets and their roster than I do in the Brooklyn Nets, despite the fact that the Nets play at home. I think that LaMelo Ball is a very difficult matchup for the Nets, especially a team that doesn't really have much perimeter defenders. I don't think they're going to be able to stop LaMelo. While I do think that there is a chance that the Hornets can stop Cam Thomas from scoring. So I'm going to pick the Hornets in this matchup. Next, the Mavericks, they're going to go up against the Pelicans. I'm going to pick the Mavericks in this matchup. I feel like Luka Doncic should be playing in this, regardless if he's not. The Pelicans are rather short-handed, and I don't really think that the Mavericks are going to end up losing to the Pelicans. I just don't really see that happening, but that's just me. Now, I already said that I think the Lakers are going to beat the Jazz. The Jazz are one of the worst teams in the entirety of the Western Conference, and the Lakers are going to have to win by a lot of points if they want to make sure to get that wild card spot in the Western Conference standings. So that way they actually, if they end up beating the Jazz in this matchup, then let me just go ahead and check real quick. They're going to be the number one team in their standings, like in their group play. I'm pretty sure that the Thunder, they might end up beating the Spurs. I mean, it's going to be really difficult because they're not going to have a center, and not having a center is just going to give Victor Wembanyama like a field day going up against the Thunder. So that matchup is going to be really, really close. I actually don't know which team would end up coming out on top. But regardless, if the Lakers want to be number one in their group play, then they're going to have to win by a lot of points against the Jazz. And regardless if they're not in the group play, then they'll hold the wild card spot and replace Portland because they'll have the better record. But for the Thunder, I think the Thunder is going to be a bit of a challenge because assuming Victor Wembanyama plays in this matchup, the tallest player in the starting lineup for the Thunder is going to be a 6'6" SGA. I don't think that anyone on the Thunder is going to be able to guard Victor Wembanyama in this game at all. However, this could also work against the Spurs because they might end up doubling Victor Wembanyama. But regardless, I don't think that... I think I'm going to pick the Spurs in this matchup. I just have way too much faith in Victor Wembanyama. It's like he's going to be playing against little children. Like when you compare his height to the rest of the players in the Thunder's roster right now, I think the Spurs are going to end up coming out on top. Now, if Chet was in this game, this would be a completely different story, but he's not. So I think I'm going to go with the Spurs on this one. I think the Spurs are going to upset the Thunder. I could be wrong on this one, though. Next, the Nuggets, they're going up against the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm going to pick the Nuggets in this matchup. I have a lot of faith in Nikola Jokic. I have no doubt that he's going to end this game with a triple-double, and I don't really think there's going to be anybody on the Grizzlies roster that is going to be able to stop Jokic. So those are my predictions. I have one team upsetting a very high-seeded team. I think the Thunder are going to drop this one. And it's really, the only reason why I think that is because they don't have Chet Holmgren to answer to Victor Wembanyama. So that's all that I have in this fifth segment, and that's it for the show. So thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, or anything that you're just dying to share, we're all ears. And if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then you can use Super Chat, or you can use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. That's all that I really have to say about the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bit.